The steak knife I was holding, the expensive, newly sharpened one that had been a wedding gift, felt suddenly heavy and dangerously real in my hand. I stared across the polished mahogany table at my father, Robert. He wasn't just angry, he was incandescent, his face a mottled, horrifying shade of purple, spittle flying from his lips. "You and your kid are nothing but leeches sucking this family dry," he roared, the sound echoing off the vaulted ceiling of my dining room, drowning out the gentle Christmas music I'd carefully selected. The words were meant for me, Alara, but the cruel, casual mention of "your kid" slammed into me like a physical blow. 5-year-old Leo, my quiet, kind, and suddenly very small son, was sitting 2 chairs down, his eyes wide and trembling as he looked at the man he called Grandpa. Leo's plastic plate, half filled with the expensive roast turkey I'd spent 6 hours perfecting, tipped over with a soft clunk onto the silk runner. My mother, Clara, immediately leapt to her feet, not to defend me or her grandson, but to grab my father's flailing arm. "Robert, stop it, not in front of Leo." Her voice was shrill, laced with the same old toxic cocktail of fear and enablement I'd known my whole life. My younger brother, Julian, the favorite son, the golden boy whose trust fund had just mysteriously tripled, sat back in his chair, a smirk playing on his lips as he sipped his Bordeaux. Julian had engineered this moment, whispering poison into my father's ear for weeks, seeding the ground for this volcanic eruption. For 20 years, since my inheritance was halved following my parents' unforeseen financial difficulties, which translated to paying off Julian's massive, undisclosed gambling debts, I had endured this slow, agonizing bleed, the constant guilt trips, the subtle digs about my photography career being a hobby, the way every gift to Leo was accompanied by a lecture on fiscal responsibility. But this was different. This wasn't a dig at my finances. This was an attack on my son's worth. The adrenaline hit me, not as panic, but as a cold, terrifying clarity. I looked down at the knife in my hand, then slowly, deliberately placed it beside my plate. I reached over and gently pulled Leo's chair close to mine, wrapping one arm around his small, rigid body. "Look at me, Dad," I said, my voice low and steady, cutting through the din. "Look at me." Robert didn't stop shouting, but he did turn his enraged eyes toward me. "I have worked since I was 18. I never asked you for a dime after college, even when Leo was born. You lecture me about sucking the family dry while you use my trust funds to bail out Julian's recklessness for the 3rd time." Julian finally dropped his smirk, his eyes flashing with genuine alarm. He knew I had hit the bullseye. "Don't you dare drag Julian into this," my father bellowed. "He's family. He supports us. What do, Alara? You take, and you produce nothing but excuses." Leo began to cry, silent, fat tears streaming down his cheeks, burrowing into the fabric of my sweater. That was the line. The final, unforgivable transgression. The feeling wasn't anger anymore. It was absolute, protective, zero tolerance. I stood up, pushing my chair back sharply. The sudden scrape of wood against wood was the second loudest sound in the room, next to my father's panting breath. I looked at my father, then at my mother, whose eyes pleaded with me to sit down and suffer in silence. I glanced at Julian, who was now gripping his wine glass, realizing the quiet daughter was about to detonate. I didn't scream back. I didn't cry. I simply stated the new reality. You have 24 hours to leave. The dining room plunged into a silence so profound I could hear the expensive mechanical whir of the clock on the mantelpiece. My father blinked twice, his mouth agape, his rage momentarily frozen. What? This house, I clarified, sweeping my arm to encompass the expensive furniture, the imported artwork, the table laden with my food. This house is mine. It's in my name, signed over to me by Grandma Rose when she died, not as an asset of your business, Dad, as my property. This was the Stone family's other, far greater secret. The house wasn't Robert's. It was my inheritance from my paternal grandmother, who hated the way Robert and Clara had treated me, and who had ensured I had one unassailable anchor. For the last 2 years, Robert and Clara had been living with me. After their latest financial blunder left them effectively homeless, convinced that as their obedient daughter, I would never dare ask them to leave.
You're throwing your own mother and father out on the street? Clara finally cried, the fear turning to calculated hysteria. No, Mom. I am telling the man who just screamed at my 5-year-old son that he is a leech and the woman who enables him that they are no longer welcome in my home. I corrected her, keeping my voice firm. You are not on the street. You have plenty of resources. Julian is right here. He can host you. I looked directly at Julian, who choked on his wine. His face was a masterpiece of instant regret. He couldn't refuse without exposing his monumental selfishness. You will be out by 8 p.m. tomorrow, I finished, walking around the table toward the front door. I picked up their expensive coats and threw them onto the floor. The locks are being changed at 8:01 p.m. And if you try to stop me, the police will be here and I will be filing a restraining order. I picked up Leo, holding him tightly against my shoulder, his tears wetting my neck. I left the dining room, walking past the stunned guests who were now silently staring at the untouched feast. I didn't look back at the chaos I had just created. I just walked, Leo in my arms, toward the sanctuary of his bedroom. The confrontation was over, but the war had just begun. That night, after I had finally settled a traumatized Leo into bed, I retreated to my home office. My phone rang. It was Julian. "Lara, what the hell was that?" he hissed, his voice dropping the polite veneer he usually used in my presence. That was me setting a boundary, Julian. A boundary that should have been set 2 decades ago. I replied, pulling up the property deed for the house on my laptop. Your father's losing it. He's threatening to sue you. He says Grandma Rose wasn't in her right mind when she signed the deed. Julian was panicked. He says he will ruin your photography business, call every one of your clients. He can try, but my business is fine, and I've already sent a legal cease and desist to his lawyer, stating that any slander will be met with a public accounting of all his corporate debts, which I know you helped him cover up. Good luck with the SEC when they see those numbers, Julian. The bluff was effective. Julian owned several businesses tangled up with my father's shaky finances. Julian fell silent for a dangerous second. You think you've won, don't you? You think you're free? His voice changed, becoming low and conspiratorial. You don't know what they did to get this house back the first time, Lara. You only know half the story. And if you kick them out, they will tell the world the real reason you hate them so much, the reason you can't forgive them for what they did to your first husband. The air left my lungs. My first marriage, before Leo. A short, miserable union that ended not in divorce, but in tragedy. My husband, Adam, died unexpectedly 3 years ago. The family had always claimed it was a random accident, but the grief had haunted me, a heavy cloak I never shed. What are you talking about, Julian? I whispered, my protective anger dissolving into a cold, deep fear. They didn't just hate Adam because he was poor. They arranged for him to disappear. It was Dad's money, Lara, a payoff. That was the unforeseen difficulty that started years ago, paying off the people who helped him disappear Adam when he refused to sign the divorce papers. They framed it as an accident to protect the family name and you. And the price for their silence? Letting them stay here, in the house Grandma Rose left you to keep you safe. I felt dizzy. The official report stated Adam's small boat was caught in an unexpected storm off the coast of Maine. The body was never recovered. Suicide was rumored, but I had always fiercely rejected the idea. You're lying, I choked out, running a hand through my hair. You are trying to manipulate me into letting them stay. Am I? Julian's voice was sickeningly calm. Check your mother's bedside table drawer. under the velvet lining, there's a small, sealed envelope. If you see what's inside, you'll know why you can never truly be free of them." Julian hung up. The dial tone buzzed loudly in the now silent office. I sat there frozen. I wanted to dismiss it as a desperate, insane lie, but the way my father had behaved, the years of crushing, unspoken guilt, it all pointed to a far darker secret than mere financial mismanagement. They had not just manipulated me, they had potentially fabricated a man's death. I had 24 hours until the deadline. I had to know. I crept down the hall to my parents' guest room. Their room, for now. My heart was pounding like a drum against my ribs. The room was dark, filled with the stale scent of my mother's expensive French perfume. I found the bedside table. I gently opened the top drawer. It contained a silk sleep mask and a small antique silver jewelry box. I lifted the velvet lining of the drawer. My fingers immediately brushed against a crisp, sealed edge. The envelope was thick, heavy linen, addressed to my mother in a strange, antiquated script. I tore it open. Inside, there was no letter. There was only a single, glossy photograph folded neatly in half. I unfolded it, shining my phone light on the image. It wasn't Adam. It was a picture of my father, Robert, shaking hands with a tall, heavily tattooed man on a dimly lit dock. The date stamp on the bottom of the photo was exactly 3 weeks before Adam's disappearance. The photograph itself was unsettling, but the small, separate note tucked behind it was worse. It was a receipt from a local boat rental company, dated the morning after Adam's disappearance. The receipt listed a single rental of a large fishing vessel, paid in cash, signed by R. Stone. This wasn't proof of murder, but it was damning proof of my father's involvement in Adam's final days, something he had sworn for years was completely untrue. He had lied about his whereabouts, he had arranged a meeting, and now Julian was claiming that meeting ended in a payoff. I was shaking, the paper crinkling in my hand. I hadn't just kicked out 2 people, I had destabilized a carefully constructed criminal enterprise. As I tucked the evidence into my pocket, I heard the creak of the guest room door opening behind me. "What are you looking for, Ilara?" My mother, Clara, stood in the doorway, wearing a silk robe, her face pale, but her eyes sharp and utterly devoid of pity. She hadn't been asleep. She had been waiting. "You know what I'm looking for, Mom," I replied, standing up, trying to keep my voice steady. "You knew Julian was going to tell me." "Julian told you nothing but garbage meant to scare you," she sniffed, walking into the room and switching on a small lamp. "That photo is meaningless. Your father was hiring a fisherman to search for Adam after the storm hit. He just didn't want you to worry." "Then why did he pay cash? And why did Julian tell me it was a payoff?" Clara walked toward me, her face softening into the familiar, manipulative mask of a suffering martyr. "Because he's terrified, Ilara. He knows what really happens if you cut us off. It's not about the money, darling. It's about the truth."
She leaned in close, her breath smelling of mint and desperation. That house, this house, it was Adam's first. He owned it before he married you. Your grandmother never gave it to you. Adam did. He signed it over to you right after the wedding to protect you from his own past, knowing your father would never tell you the truth. My head spun. Adam had owned this house? He had transferred the deed to me? I had always been told it was Grandma Rose's gift. Why would Adam do that? Clara smiled, a chilling, triumphant expression. Because Adam wasn't poor, Ilara. He was running from a massive debt tied to a criminal syndicate in the city. When your father found out, he didn't pay Adam to disappear. He paid the syndicate to stop looking for him. The storm was real, Ilara, but Adam knew he couldn't outrun them forever. Your father gave him a chance to vanish, to fake his own death, to protect you and his future family, Leo. And the price for Robert's intervention? The house, of course, for my retirement. but Adam gave it to you, infuriating your father." She gestured around the room. "We had no money because your father spent everything saving your husband's life, Alara. We live here because that was the compromise. Silence for safety." The air felt thin. I was standing in a house that wasn't an inheritance, but a life insurance policy taken out by a man who loved me enough to disappear. And my father hadn't tried to kill Adam. He had saved him, but at the price of controlling my every move. "So you're saying Adam is alive?" I whispered, tears finally blurring my vision. "I'm saying your father knows where he is. And if you kick us out, the deal is off. They'll start looking for Adam again, Alara. They'll come for him, and they'll come for Leo." I was trapped. If I kicked them out, I reclaimed my dignity, but I risked the life of the man I still loved and the safety of my son. If I let them stay, I would live under their tyranny forever. "Where is him? Tell me where Adam is, and I'll give you 48 hours, not 24. Clara shook her head, her eyes suddenly cold again. "I don't know. Only Robert knows, and he will tell you only when the deadline passes and he is still here, safe in his room. You have 8 hours left, Alara. You can't win this one." She turned and left the room, leaving me alone with the silent house, the damning photograph, and the crushing realization that the family betrayal had not been about money, but about a life and death secret that implicated my father as both my savior and my jailer. The choice was simple: my peace or my son's father's life. I walked back to the dining room, picking up my father's discarded coat from the floor. I reached into the breast pocket, knowing exactly what I was looking for. Robert never traveled without his encrypted satellite phone, the one he claimed was for international business. My fingers closed around the cold metal shell. If I couldn't get the location from them, I would track it myself. I had 8 hours. The countdown to reclaiming my life and possibly saving Adam's had begun.